when we wake up, it's not like this doesn't wake up, right? As you know, I mean, I'm just telling everybody at the same time. You know, it might be somebody who doesn't know. The personality does not wake up, and most of us actually came here in the hopes that our personality would wake up. Is that Fred or Bo or Nikki would wake up, and that's just not the way that it works. And so it's awakeness that wakes up, and this is very, very clear. And there is seen that it has to be awakeness because there's no Nikki or Bo or Fred. We see that there's no Nikki or Bo or Fred, and a further recognition, which may not come at that very moment, it came to me in two separate moments, was I came to see that there was no Fred, and then at another time, it wasn't long, but at another time, I came to see, oh, there never has been a Fred. There was still like somehow, well, there was a Fred, and then awakening occurred, and Fred disappeared, or Fred went away, or something. But there is no Fred. So that's the genuine waking up in a we actually wake up into we're not getting toward we're in the non-dual experience right now. So, but waking down is when it does, and just what we were talking about is when it begins to affect the body, it begins to affect the mind, it begins to affect actions. Because this thing, when I first woke up, it was pretty awful at first, because I could now watch Fred and oh God, you know, I think you and I've talked about this, and Fred was just so incredibly unskillful. I couldn't believe it. It was just awful. And I was like, God, why would I do that? You know, it's just, I know better than that. Yeah, I did. But the patterns here, the conditioning here, did not know better, because the conditioning just kept on doing what it had always been doing. Because I had been identified as awakeness, you know, for maybe 3 weeks, and as Fredness for 54 years. So the conditioning of the body will outweigh the seeing. The conditioning of the body and the mind gradually begins to thin. It thins more slowly than I used to think. And because number one, I thought I was clearer than I was. Just, you know, I wasn't one of those who said, gee, I really should be clearer than this. I went, gee, I am clearer than this. But I wasn't, right? And so as awakeness begins to take over, because it will, it just does it slowly, it does it by degree, it does it bit by bit, and it does it in its own way, in its own time, and we can't really rush that. What we can do is we can encourage that by not fighting the change. In the same way that we can encourage awakening simply by not fighting what it says. We can have an awakening. I've seen a couple of people recently, and many before them. But you can watch somebody and they'll wake up, and they see clearly, they see the truth, and then then there's a backward movement into what do I do with this, says Bob. And of course, you know, that movement that I think I'm a Bob is a movement back into the drain. So as the mind begins to slow down in that process, where it doesn't move so quickly back to the sense of a Bob, yeah, the sense of a personal me. The process of embodiment is this waking down. It's when realization actually begins to have effect within the world, other than the fact that it's that there's a glow for this one, and maybe glow for those who are right up next to it, maybe not. But we find that the body becomes much more supple, much, it is much gentler. And it's gentle not just with other people, but it's gentle with itself. I find that my movements are not always. There's plenty of conditioning left over here. But I find that my movements they're not more studied, but they look like they were, in the sense that it's just a smooth action. And you notice that you can do less in your life and more happens in your life anyway, which is I don't have to go out there and fix everything because it's already fixed. I just have to come to understand that it's fixed. And that is the mind falling under the spell of embodiment, or falling out of the spell of the dream would be a better way to put it. Because embodiment is not a spell, it's the natural state. And that's the thing we need to understand. We don't need to hold on to awakeness, because as we sometimes believe, as I believed I needed to do when I first woke up, how do I hold on to this? Well, oneness can't fall out of itself. So what happens really is that we come to understand the true situation much more clearly, which is that, oh, I see, I'm not awake, I am awakeness. And we can see that. I mean, I pointed out to people in an awakening session, so yes, you can see you're not awake, you're awakeness itself. But it doesn't usually take, they may see it at that moment, but it probably won't take. In other words, there's not going to be real change that's going to occur from that. And embodiment is when you do begin to see the change, and you begin to notice that, I notice it really just all the time. I notice it every time that I make a contribution towards human beings that are suffering, is that it doesn't directly affect me. Why am I doing that? And it's because, well, everything affects me because I'm it. So I'm a little bit more comfortable in Ukraine or in this earthquake or whatever, right? We begin to evolve as humans, that we sort of, we don't have to. This is what's possible, and it's what I would say is the norm, but it's certainly, this is not a law. And we will become gentler, kinder, and we have to start here. We have to start with ourselves. Because I can forgive your faults and deny me that same forgiveness for the same faults. And because you don't know any better and I should, whatever, that, I'll come up, there will be some kind of little pat phrase that will pop up. So I have to say, so kindness begins at home. And when we wake up, we can't be expected. You can't expect the unit to suddenly take on the persona of, not that we're necessarily after that particular persona, but just for example, the persona of some great teacher like Ramakrishna that I mentioned, or Nisargadatta, or whoever. We wake up as, in the process of clearing, we have a tendency to make better the enemy of best. In other words, it's like me reporting, well, Betsy and I still aren't well, right? And it still hurts. That's one way to look at it, one way to report it. Another way would be to say it's better and we're delighted and we're grateful. But if you're hanging out for best only, which is what we can do for ourselves, we tend to be a little more generous with others, but some of us aren't. But at any rate, we can lower our expectations, because if you're not happy right now in your life, the fix is so simple. Just lower your expectations. Don't expect so much. So if you're not experiencing the perfection that is, then lower your expectations as to what that is and what it means. And be willing to accept that there's no really such thing as spiritual progress, but the thinning of the personality will appear to be progress for the unit, and it may even feel like progress for the unit. But in fact, what's happening is that the character, I mean, for the make-believe character that we've always thought we were until we woke up. And like I thought it was Fred Davis for years and wanted to wake up to the truth of God. And then when awakening happened, God woke up to the fiction of Fred Davis instead. And that fundamental seeing will have deep effects, but they may not be far-ranging at first. So I might become gentler and kinder with Betsy because I'm beginning to see things as they really are, which is that there is no Betsy, there's only me. But fortunately there seems to be a Betsy. I really love her. But being generous with our praise and being miserly with our criticism, it's also a good way to get along in the world. And practical things matter too. It may not count in the sense, or they may count in the sense of relativity, but not matter in the sense of the absolute. But we're not going to live by the way of the absolute. You can't. I mean, as long as there's a body here, and as long as that body is here, there's going to be a human experience, and there are going to be human foibles. And the idea that there's a perfect human out there that is not doing anything wrong ever, or being curt or anything else ever, get out of that and just drop that idea right now. It wasn't true for a great saint like Ramana, and he was a saint and a sage. I only declare to be the sage part, not the saint part. So there's still there's still a gap here between what I really am and how the unit acts and reacts, but it's just much closer to divinity than it used to be, much closer to what we would just call a better person, whatever that is, whatever our measurements are. But I'm very fortunate in that it doesn't take a lot of movement from being a creep for it to be noticeable. And that was my experience, I was just an absolute creep. So when I began to make any progress at all, the world was, wow, look at that. He's really changing. So be patient with waking up as the body, and you will learn that you can trust the body. There's certain things that you think you need to oversee that you just don't. And if you just let go of the reins, you'll find out that the body really has its own intelligence, and it will manage itself, so to speak. It will actually go with what is much more easily than it will when you think you're in charge. Because it's not that we had free will and then we woke up and we lost it. We've never had free will. And when we wake up, we recognize that we've never had free will. Because there's no one here to have free will or to not have free will. But these seeings, there can sometimes be time lapses between them. I can see the truth, and then I move back into the dream because that's where the heavy conditioning is. And then as clearing takes place, I see the truth again, and I'm moved by it in a different sort of way. And then 20 minutes later, I'm back in the dream. But later on that same day, maybe there's another breakthrough. And what we want to do is count any breakthrough as a victory. We never, ever want to move from what we feel like is cloudiness into clearness and then scold ourselves for not having stayed, having remained in clarity, or having stayed with some sort of given behaviors, because everything's changing all the time. So when we encourage ourselves to awaken, which is, I'm awake, and it's not like, oh my God, I've been asleep for 2 weeks. Instead, it's I'm awake. Wow, this is great. And if you wake up 5 times in a certain day, that really is a good thing, because what you're learning is how to drop what's in the way of wakefulness. You're learning how to not believe certain thoughts, because you may not believe the direct I'm a Fred thought, but you may believe the I'm right. And this is the lovely one that we love to side with, and I'm as guilty as anybody else. I mean, it just comes up where sometimes, the question is, would I rather be right than free? And occasionally the answer is yes. Most of the time it's seen better, but sometimes it's just like, oh, I just love being right. Thanks. Thank you. And so there's something that's been seen here so very clearly, and it's wonderful. We're all trying as hard as we can, and that has to be good enough. That's the deal. Is I don't compare myself to Bo. I compare myself, if I'm going to compare myself at all, then I need to compare the actions here now, actions and attitudes here now, and compared to the actions and attitudes of yesterday here. And if I see progress, it doesn't mean that I used to be a slug and now I'm not. It means now I'm more aware slug. And I think that'll do it.